Hello. So, I just finished reading this book, The Voice of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz. Um, it's he is the author of a popular book that a lot of people read who are wanting to go deeper into their journeys or who are on the journey of self-improvement and spirituality. He is the author of The Four Agreements, which is one of his popular books, and was actually the first book that I read by him a few years ago. So I've read that book a few times, and I've listened to some of his audiobooks, and this is one that I've been wanting to read for a while. So The Voice of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz, a Toltec wisdom book. Similar to The Four Agreements, he begins his story by talking about the Toltec and how he grew up learning about Toltec mythology, but how he kind of took the journey of splitting away from the mythological aspect of the Toltec wisdom and started to search for something deeper in his own spiritual journey, and finding the truth amongst all the lies. One thing that stood out to me that he talks about in this book is the story of Adam and Eve in the very beginning. He kind of has a different perception about the story of Adam and Eve and what it means to us, and basically how the story is just a symbol for humanity's fall from truth, and how we began to believe in distortions and in lies which govern our lives, when Eve chose to eat the apple from the tree of lies, or from the forbidden fruit. That is basically a symbol for humanity's fall from the truth, and when we began to believe in lies. So he talks about the tree of knowledge is what she ate the fruit from, and he talks about how we all have a tree of knowledge, how from childhood we all receive seeds from the people around us who received the same thing from their elders and people who raised them, and how the seeds that are planted grow into trees of knowledge which branch off into different belief systems and things like that, and how those belief systems govern our lives. So in this book, it's kind of like he tells stories, and from those stories in his life that he tells, he kind of pulls it in and tells us ways that we can stop believing the voice of knowledge in our head and go back to believing in the truth, rather than believing in lies, and how we can start unpacking our own tree of knowledge and our own belief systems, and learn to unpack those things so that we can live a more enlightened life and live in truth. And he says one thing that was so whenever I think about knowledge, I never really thought about it as, I guess it's not, he doesn't necessarily say that knowledge is a negative thing. He doesn't say it's negative or positive, but in this book he has a different view of it that I never really thought about. When I think about knowledge, I think about things that I know, things that other people have told me, or things that I've learned along the years, which I guess is what he's talking about. But he talks about knowledge more in a sense of the things that we receive from other people, the seeds that are planted in our head, and the voice of knowledge is basically the voice in our head which tells us lies that we've got from society or from the people in our lives that we're told the same lies. So, sorry, there's a dog over there, a big old dog. So, that's what he talks about in this book. It was a very good read, and I'm definitely gonna read it again, because I feel like once I read it again, I'll probably get more from it, and it'll kind of seep into my head even more. But from the first initial read, I really love this book, and like I said, I am going to read it again. Um, and yeah, he kind of puts more things into perspective. He also mentions the four agreements in this book. He talks about four agreements as a way of dismantling the belief systems that we have in our head and coming back into truth. He talks about being impeccable with your word, always doing your best, um, not making assumptions, and not taking anything personally. And how in his personal journey through having these realizations, he kind of realized how people in around him, like in his profession as a doctor, he kind of realized how humans are always making drama for themselves, how they're always taking things personally, making assumptions, not doing their best, and not being impeccable with their word, which causes kind of like a perpetuating cycle of negativity in their lives that's self-created. And once he kind of had his own like eye-opening awakening, he started to realize the drama that he created in his own life for himself and the drama that the people around him were creating in his profession. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And this book is definitely very insightful, and I love it. So I'm definitely gonna, yeah. The next book that I'm gonna read of his, I gave away my Four Agreements book to a friend, so I don't have that anymore, but I think I'm gonna buy myself another copy because that's a really good book to just have, and it's like really quick and easy. You could read it in like a few hours in a day. So I want to get another copy of the Four Agreements. I also want to read The Mastery of Love. I listened to the audiobook version of that, but I feel like I'm able to like remember things better when I read it rather than listening to it, because when I'm just listening to something, it's really easy for me to tune it out and put it in it easily becomes background noise. But if I'm reading something, it's right in front of me, so I'm able to remember it more easily. So I definitely want to read The Mastery of Love, even though I've already listened to the to the audiobook. And I also want to read the Fifth Agreement. And yeah, this time reading it, the first time I didn't highlight anything or underline anything. But next time I read it, I probably will highlight and underline stuff that I maybe didn't see before. He also talks about one of the key ways of coming back into the truth is not believing yourself and not believing anybody else. Because as he kind of talks about in the Four Agreements book, whatever anybody else's perception of you is just an image. It's not actually you, it's just the image that they have of you, and that image is based off of their perspective and their own story and their own personal belief systems. So anybody's image that they have of you, like whatever other people say about you, is just a reflection of what they believe about life and a reflection of their own beliefs rather than actually reflecting you. So he says, don't believe anybody else and don't believe yourself. Don't believe the voice of knowledge that's in your head that tells you that you're not good enough, that you're not doing enough, because that voice is filled with lies. So don't believe what the voice of knowledge says in your head, and don't believe what other people say about you, because you're more than what anybody else can say about you, and you're more than your physical body. You're more than you don't even know what you are, is what he mentions. Like, you don't even know what you are, so how can anybody else make that judgment of you and know who you are? Like, that's why it's so important not to take things personally, because you don't know what you are, let alone does anybody else. But you can still love yourself for what you are and have complete self-acceptance for what you are as you are, while still not knowing completely what you are. But yeah, read this book. Peace.